Hi everyone, this is Lisa. Welcome back again to lesson number 2. Is that correct? Yeah, lesson number 2 in our Torah 101 study of the book of Bereshit. That is your Hebrew word, Bereshit, which means in the beginning, or as we say in English, Genesis. So last week we ended up with God said, let there be light, and there was light, and that was a supernatural light. But today, I started with something else last week that I'm going to continue with, and I told you that the book of Genesis, or well, for that matter, the entire Bible, the Bible is a living word, so you could study it, you could restudy it from now until eternity. Every time you study it, you're going to learn something new. And the Hebrew language is like that because it is a language like no other. It has the 22 letters, with each one having a number and a pictograph. And in Hebrew, they call the numbers gematria. We might call it numerology. And I don't want to go off too deep in that, but when it comes to Bereshit, because it is such a foundational book, I want to delve a little bit into the pictograph, what it means, and some numbers as well. So last week I started with the word Bereshit, and I told you that it had 6 letters that make up the word Bereshit. The first one is Beit, and it means house or tent in Hebrew. The second letter is a Resh, and the Resh means head, the leader, head person, a prince first. So a Beit and a Resh, if you put those together, you get bar. It spells out the Hebrew word bar, which means son in Hebrew. So it's interesting that God here is building his house. He is building it with his son. Now that's pretty amazing, since we learn in the New Testament, John says that Yeshua was in the beginning, was with God and was God, and that all things were created by him. And I mentioned to you about the Logos and the Word and the Memra last week. So he's building a house, and of course a son represents a genealogy. It represents a lineage, the continuity of the seed in the next generation, the son, the prince. So Yeshua here is building his house with his son. Then the third word in the word Bereshit is an Aleph. Aleph. It is the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and it represents Elohim. The pictograph is an ox, which represents authority and strength. If you spell the word Aleph out, which is an Aleph and a Lamed, you get the picture of a shepherd's staff, which, of course, a shepherd's staff represents strong authority. And I find that interesting because we know that Yeshua is our shepherd. Then the fourth letter is a Shin, and it also represents Elohim, but it represents the pictograph for it is teeth, and it means to consume, to destroy, or to devour. We know that God is also not only a God of love, but he is a God, he is a consuming fire. The fifth letter is Yud. It represents the hand. And the sixth letter is a Tav. The Tav is the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and it represents a covenant, a sign, and 2 sticks that come together making a cross. So if you put the Beit, the Resh, and the Aleph, the first 3 letters together, you spell out the word in Hebrew, bara, which I've already said when I said the first sentence there in Genesis, or Genesis 1:1 in Hebrew. It means created. So we find there the creator in that the first 3 letters spelling out bara. But what I like is if you put all of these 6 letters together, you could come out with a picture or word sentence that looks like this. The prince, who's the head of the house, is a strong shepherd, and he was destroyed, nails in his hands, on a cross. Now that's very significant. I don't think that's just by chance. In addition, if you add up what a Beit, Resh, Aleph, Shin, Yud, and a Tav They're numerical representations. If you add those up, you come up with a total number of 913. Now, I looked up really quickly, I Googled what the number 913 meant in Hebrew, and it says it means house of the kingdom or a palace. And that's what I've just told you, is that in Genesis, it is a foundational book that we may know our Creator and His plan of salvation through His Son, the Shepherd, who gave His life for us on the cross. He is the head of the family, the kingdom, the house that God is building in Genesis. And we will learn more about this God, the Creator, as we go through Genesis, what our purpose in life is. Why did He create all of this? Again, it's His kingdom, a house, but what's our purpose in it? And those are some of the questions that we hope to discover in this lesson. Now I want to go on, and I want to pick up now with something else that I did not discuss last week. Now that we have established that God here in Genesis is building a house or His kingdom on earth, on this earth that He is creating, I want to talk to you about another word that we find in Genesis 1:1. And I'm going to say it in Hebrew again, and then we're going to discuss it. Bereshit, bara, that's in the beginning, created. Bereshit bara Elohim, God, in the beginning created God. The next word is et. That's the one I want to talk about. Bereshit bara Elohim et. Hashemayim vayet haaretz. In the beginning created Elohim et, the heavens and the earth. Et is a Hebrew word made up of two letters, the aleph and the tav, which is the first and last letters in the Hebrew alphabet. It is untranslatable in any other language in the world. It is a sign, it is grammar, it is in Hebrew grammar, it is a sign of the definite direct object. However, it has a much deeper meaning. It means entity, self-existent, as in I am, as in I am that I am. It is the object of the verb. In other words, it is the one doing the creation. The aleph, tav. In Hebrew, we say the Alpha and Omega. That's what the et represents. The Alpha and Omega, the aleph, tav. The one doing the creation. They further go on to say that it is related to the Hebrew word ot, which means a sign, a signal, a sense of appearing, or a mark. It is the arrival of one to a mark, an agreement or covenant by two, where a sign or a mark is a reminder to both parties. And I told you that the tav represented a covenant, and that's what the ot is. In Matthew 24:30, it says Yeshua says about His coming, you shall see the sign, the ot, of the Son of Man in the clouds. Yeshua is this aleph tav, this et, that is untranslatable in other languages. All right, so I want to talk about, as I said, the aleph tav means the first and the last, the beginning and the end. Now, if you have your word, turn with me to Isaiah chapter 46, Isaiah 44 and 6. And here's what we read about the Creator, Yud-He-Vav-He, or Yahweh. Thus saith the Lord, thus saith Yahweh, the King of Israel, and His Redeemer, the Yahweh of hosts, I am the first, and I am the last. And beside me there is no Elohim, there is no God. So He declares Himself in that self-existing identity, I am. But He says He is the first and the last. Now notice that's the Father, Yud-He-Vav-He, Yahweh, that is saying that. Now read Isaiah 48 and 12. And of course there are many other scriptures, but I'm just going to read these two just to show you that they're in there. But Isaiah 48 and 12 says, Hearken unto me, O Jacob and Israel, my called. I am He. I am the first, and I also am the last. That is what God the Father spoke about Himself. Now, if you will turn over to Revelation chapter 1 and verse 10, I will begin reading. And we'll read we'll read through verse 18, skipping verse 11. Well, I'm sorry, not verse 11. Anyway, I'm just going to start reading. Here it goes. In verse 10, I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day and heard behind me a great voice as of a trumpet saying, I am Alpha and Omega, or I am the Aleph and the Tav, the first and the last, and what thou seest write in a book. And of course it says send it to the churches. In verse 12, and I turned to see the voice that spake with me, and being turned I saw 7 golden candlesticks. And in the midst of the 7 candlesticks, one like unto the Son of Man, clothed with a garment down to the foot, and girt about the paps with a golden girdle. His head and his hairs were white like wool, as white as snow, and his eyes were as a flame of fire, and his feet like unto fine brass, as if they burned in a furnace, and his voice is the sound of many waters. And he had in his right hand 7 stars, and out of his mouth went a sharp 2-edged sword, and his countenance was as the sun shineth in his strength. And when I saw him, I fell at his feet as dead. And he said, and he laid his right hand upon me, saying unto me, Fear not, I am the first and the last. I am the Aleph Tav. I am he that liveth. He said, I am again. I am he that liveth and was dead, and behold, I am alive forevermore. Amen, and have the keys of hell and of death. So we see here that Yeshua says about himself, calling himself the Aleph Tav, or the first and the last, the beginning and the end. And in Revelation 21 and verse 5 and 6, Yeshua again says, and he that sat upon the throne, notice Yeshua is sitting on the throne, said, Behold, I make all things new. And he said unto me, Write, for these words are true and faithful. And he said unto me, It is done. I am the Alpha and Omega, or I am the Aleph and the Tav, the beginning and the end. I will give unto him that is athirst of the fountain of the water of life freely. And one last scripture I wish to share, and that is in Revelation chapter 22 and verse 13. Yeshua again speaking, I am the Aleph Tav, I am the Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end, the first and the last. Now here's the thing about that. Yeshua would be guilty of blasphemy, and that is against God's commands if he made these statements and it was not true. But here Yeshua is declaring himself to be God. He is saying, just like the Creator, I am Et. I am the Aleph Tav, the one that was in the beginning, created, Elohim, Et. I am the one that was in the beginning and the end, the first and the last. So we see that he is the Logos, the Word, and the Memra. When it said a sharp-edged sword went out from his mouth, the sharp-edged sword was his words that we will find God speaking to us in those first 5 books of the Bible. That was his word. And so we see that Yeshua is God, separate and yet the same. So now I want to pick up where I left off last week in chapter 1. Genesis 1 and 1. I ended in verse 3 where it said, And God said, Let there be light, and there was light. But now I have gone back and I have talked some more about some of the meanings of these words. So as far as the numerology and the pictograph form. So I hope you're beginning to see a better picture there of what God is doing here in his creation and establishing family, a house. You and I are of the family of God. But what does that mean for us? That's what we're going to find out in the book of Genesis. All right, we will go on in Genesis 1 and 4. It says, And God saw the light. We're in day 1. And God saw the light that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and the evening and the morning were the first day. Here we find that God did not call the darkness good. He only called the light good, for darkness is never good. Darkness represents evil, and God said that in him there is no darkness nor shadow of turning. So he only called the light, by the way, which emanated from him here, he called good. He also said that it was the first day, but actually in Hebrew it does not use the number that Hebrew uses for the number 1, but instead it says that it is echad day, meaning that everything that God has done here since he hovered over the waters, that it's in unity. That is what echad means. It means one, unified. It is a unified day from the day that God hovered over the waters and he separated the light from the darkness, that light coming forth from him. The light was good. In the next verse it said, now we're going to see that God, in verse 6, he already has divided. He started the process of separation and dividing. But he's doing that to regather. Okay? So in verse 6 now, he is going to start separating and dividing the waters, but only to regather them, and that is important. So in verse 6 it says, and God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. And God made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament, and it was so. And God called the firmament heaven. Now in Hebrew that is shemayim, and in Hebrew heaven is always plural. Now we read the Apostle Paul said that he went up to the third heaven. Some may say that there are more, but in Hebrew there's definitely 3 heavens. The first heaven is what we look up and see, our atmosphere, the clouds and all of that. The second heaven is what is beyond that, the galaxies, the sun, the moon, the stars. And the third heaven is said to be where God dwells. But here he made basically our firmament. He made our atmosphere. And the evening and the morning were the second day. Another thing I wanted to bring out about creation that he also said on the first day is, when does the day begin for God? In the Hebrew calendar and in God's calendar, days do not go from midnight to midnight or from sunrise to sunrise, but days go from evening, sunset to sunset, sunset to sunset. And that's what we find here. The evening first and then the morning. Notice on day 2 that God did not call anything good. I told you that waters represent chaos and confusion, and he has been dividing the waters from below and above. He's been dividing them, but he did not call anything good on day 2. He is just separating the waters that already existed upon the earth when we first encountered it, and he's bringing order to that water, to those waters. Now, on the third day, Genesis 1:9, and God said, let the waters under the heavens be gathered together unto one place, and let the dry land appear, and it was so. And God called the dry land earth. And the gathering together of the waters God called he seas, and God saw that it was good. And God said, let the earth bring forth grass, the herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed is in itself upon the earth, and it was so. And the earth brought forth grass, and herb yielding seed after his kind, and the tree yielding fruit, whose seed was in itself after his kind, and God saw that it was good. And the evening and the morning were the third day. Now notice here that God said on the third day, twice he said he called things good. First of all, he had divided the waters above from that below. But now on the third day, he has divided, but now he is regathering. So he has regathered the waters into groups and calls them seas. The dry land has appeared and he calls it earth. Then also now he is causing grass, the trees, the herbs, all the green bearing things, stuff on the earth. He's causing it to produce and come forth on the earth. So what we find here is that God is setting in order a principle of seed. Everything that comes forth upon the earth, it replenishes itself. It multiplies and it populates the earth. And that is important because that has to do with the word good. What I say is good and what you say is good, just as what I say is bad and what you may say is bad, can differ. So what does God mean when he calls something good? It means that it is perfect, lacking nothing. It means that it does not ever need to be changed. It means that it is supposed to continue on just the way that he made it. That is why he made the seed to bring forth seed, forever to bring forth seed, so that trees, the same trees you see out there now, that seed's been dropping since creation. This is where a foundational principle is important, and we're going to see this as we continue on with the creation of the male and the female. Because again, these are foundational principles, and what God calls good, man needs to leave alone. Have you ever heard of a hybrid seed? Now, it is one thing to mix two seeds that are similar, and that's okay. They can still bring forth fruit. But when you begin to mix seeds that are so drastically different, their DNA makeup is different. You can go to town, and a lot of the seeds that you buy, a lot of the plants that you buy now, that we buy, they are hybrids. Man has manipulated their DNA to the point that they will only bear fruit one time. If you try to plant those seeds, next year those seeds will not produce because they have been manipulated by man. That is not what God called good, and it's not good. It is bad. It is against the nature of God. When we get to God creating the man and the woman, the male and the female, it was good. And now we see that man has corrupted that. And we will talk about that later when we get there. But it's very important that we understand principles as we go along. If God calls something good, that it's perfect. Here's another thought that I want to introduce, because I'm not going to get off into the fourth day. I don't have enough time because I'm trying to keep these about 30 minutes. I know that we're busy people. We work. I work a full-time job. Most of you do. And we have full-time jobs when we get home from work. So I'm trying to keep them short. But I do want you to drop me a line in the forum or underneath this video and let me know that you're watching and that you're enjoying them. I promise that you are not, we have not even scratched the surface of things that we will get into in the book of Genesis. But one thing I want to bring out is that we have to begin to look at things through a different mindset. We can't look through American glasses or Greek glasses. Most of us try to interpret the Bible like God was from America, or like God was a Greek, blonde-haired, blue-eyed man, but he wasn't. He was a Hebrew. He was a Jew. So we have to interpret the Bible according to that culture. Now, I know that Genesis, you may say, but we're in Genesis. Yes, we are in Genesis, but God does not change. So in Genesis, we still have to look at it from how it was written, and we have to go back to the Hebrew language, because that was the original language that it was written in. So anytime we read, we have to take it back to the original language. If it's Greek in the New Testament, we still have to understand that it was Jews that wrote it in a Hebrew mindset. So whatever you read in the New Testament or the Newer Covenant, there is a scripture or a principle for that concept in the older covenant, what we call the what we call the Old Testament. So we've got to learn to go back and study the old so that we can understand the new. So next week we will pick up with day 4, and we will hopefully, we'll get finished with all the days of creation, hopefully next week. Another thing I'll say here, I still have about 5 minutes left, and I'm not going off into this. This is one of those times where you can come back and learn something different if you were to study Genesis again. But there are many teachers out there that teach that the 7 days of creation are also, they also parallel the 7 candlesticks on the menorah. And we saw this in Revelation where Yeshua was speaking, and it mentioned the candelabra, the menorah, and there are 7 lamps on there. Well, it's not a candlestick, it's actually a lampstand. But there are 7 on there, and they say that these 7 also parallel the 7 days of creation. That's another depth to Genesis, but I'm not going to go there, but I did just want to mention it. It might be something that you might want to look up and study. So until next week, blessings upon you, and please join me. Okay? Shalom.